Yay. Yeah, people always, I always get comments because I pretty much always look this way. And people are, will comment. I forget it, like, because I always look this way. And, people walk up to me and go, why? And they're like, I'm an Arizona historian. If I show up wearing an Armani suit, you don't believe I know what I'm talking about. So, kind of has to go with it. Anyway, today, we are going to meet Eva Blanchard. Actually, Annie Sullivan Wiley, who was known as Eva Blanchard for a portion of her life. Probably during her time period, she's probably one of the best known women in Tucson, Arizona. She was a philanthropist, entrepreneur, heavily invested in real estate, and of course she was a madam. Her business was prostitution, which is probably one of the reasons she never makes the list of famous women of Tucson who helped build Tucson, because they were kind of like, oh, should we include her? So that's her there. Actually, kind of an interesting photo, due to the fact that she had it colorized. This was a gift to her gambler boyfriend, Joseph Wiley. So they had a tumultuous relationship, as you will see. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Annie was actually born in Ireland, County Clare, on January 18th, 1855. On December 18th of that year, she was baptized in a church there in Clare County. Child's parents were listed as Patrick Sullivan and Margaret Hortney. In November of 1869, a 4-year-old girl named Annie Sullivan got on a steamship with her parents and her siblings and came to the United States of America. Probably came through Ellis Island with all the other Irish immigrants. Let's see. According to the Passenger Manifest, she was accompanied by Mike Sullivan, his wife Margaret, sisters Bridget, Mary, and a 2-year-old brother named Johnson. We don't know what happened to them. I could not find a record. Somehow they just disappeared. Of course, going through the census records was a little bit of a slog due to the fact that, it's put in the last name Sullivan, Irish immigrants, 1890, yeah, okay. Guess where that gets you. Anyway, we do know that they may have actually died because Annie was educated in the convent of the Sacred Heart School, the female academy, in New York City, which they used to take in orphan children and educate them. So it's very, very likely her parents died, or for some reason she was cast out. We're not really sure. But she ends up there. The New York Times, the New York Tribune actually made mention of her graduation date. There was 2 people who graduated from the convent commencement in June 23rd, 1880. There's Annie O'Sullivan. The name also seemed to keep changing too. I think she was probably originally Annie O'Sullivan, then dropped the O. Her tombstone says Annie Sullivan. So, but she also, one of the girls who graduated with her, was named Bertha Blanchard, which we'll see where that leads us. We don't, about 6 months after she graduates, there's a headline in the Boston Globe advertising clairvoyance. And there's beautiful New York City at the time. Okay. Arrived from Europe, the greatest clairvoyants in the world, Miss Bertha Greenwood and Miss Eva Blanchard. It's the first time that the name Eva Blanchard shows up. Funny that one of her classmates was Bertha Blanchard, who becomes Bertha Greenwood. Now, there's a fairly good chance the 2 girls got out of school, changed their names, and went to Boston. As you can tell by some of these other ones, Miss Valentine, Frenchie, Miss Felicia. What do you think? Yeah, we kind of get that. And with the fact that they advertise gives electric baths. Ooh. So yeah, you kind of get an idea what these girls are probably doing. They're not telling fortunes. So yeah, after this is the first time she shows up, and then she disappears for about 8 years. My guess is she probably was learning the business. Yeah, she didn't arrive in the Arizona Territory until 1887. The first mention of her is in a Tombstone newspaper saying she has mail waiting for her. By now, she's Eva Blanchard, and she's traveling under that name. The picture here is kind of interesting. It was taken by a guy named Bowman. He was a very famous photographer in Tucson. He was also very anti-prostitution. He had property in one of the red light districts, which he rented to prostitutes, so he didn't have a problem with that. He didn't mind taking a picture of the most famous madam in the place, but he was against prostitution. Yeah, anyway, we'll get around that. So yeah, she shows up in 1887, and first mention is in Cochise County, Tombstone, and then she comes up to Tucson. Tucson was probably was a bigger city by then, and Tombstone was starting to fail. The waters were flooding the mines. It wouldn't last much longer after that. The only thing that kept Tombstone alive after this, after the mines flooded, was the fact it was the county seat. Bisbee eventually took that honor, and then Tombstone pretty much was off 30-second gunfight. Yeah, that's all that lasted. So, let's see. So she shows up in 1887. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. In November 1891, in response to pressure from moral reformers, the Tucson City Council passed Ordinance Number 72, effectively closing Maiden Lane. Up to this point, Maiden Lane had been a red light district. It wasn't official restricted district. It was just where the girls had to gather. Now, the funny thing about Maiden Lane is it really wasn't named for what went on there. It actually goes back to an old Spanish legend. The street was originally in Spanish. I'm not going to try it because my Spanish is horrible. The street of the sad Indian maiden. Allegedly, Indian maiden had an affair with a Mexican officer when Tucson was still a presidio. He died, and they kicked her out because she was Native American and not Spanish. She went back to her tribe. They didn't want her either, and so she came back to the presidio where her commandant lover was. They still wouldn't let her back in, so she settled outside, built herself a little shack, and they called it the wagon road that led out of the presidio, and they called it the Street of the Sad Indian Maiden. Well, you know, when they get anglicized, they just skipped the whole part and called it Maiden Lane. Yeah, that's too much of a mouthful if you want to say that every single time. So that's it, and by accident, it becomes a red light district. The girls just start settling in there. Unfortunately, it's right next to Congress Street. How many have been in Tucson? Okay, so if Maiden Lane kind of ran parallel to Congress Street, and then they actually intersected it at Stone, and it formed this kind of wedge-shaped bunch of buildings. Eventually, finally they demolished it in 1905 and to widen Congress, but that's where it used to be. Kind of near, but Congress was the main business district. And so they didn't really want these girls so close to the main business district, and there were complaints for years and years and years about these girls soliciting and causing havoc. And of course, prostitutes, unfortunately, have very, very wild lives. Not just with what they do, they fight amongst themselves. They attract the criminal element, pimps, procurers. They also steal from one another, and so there's always something going on down there. So what the city council decides to do is close Maiden Lane and put up and make a restricted district. This district would be the only place in Tucson where prostitution would be legal. Everywhere outside of it, you could get arrested. Usually it was a $10 fine or a $10 fine or 10 days in jail if you got caught. So originally they were going to take and make the restricted district this small street called Pearl Street. And it seemed like a really good idea. The police were really thought it was great. because we could police the area much easier. They could kind of close it off, and but unfortunately, there was one of the proprietresses who was like, no, I'm not moving over there. I'm moving to Gay Alley. Gay Alley is not named for what went on there either. Gay Alley was named for a guy named Joseph Gay, who was originally a pioneer in Tucson. And so, so that was, the street was named for him. Well, the proprietress was like, no, there's a big house at the end of Gay Alley, and I want it. I'm taking it. That's what I'm moving. And basically, they were like, well, I guess that'll work. Sure, that's the red light district now. That's the restricted district. It won't be Pearl Street, it'll be Gay Alley. And you can guess who that proprietress was. Eva Blanchard by this time has become a madam. She is becoming exceedingly wealthy. She's investing in real estate all over the place. She would become the queen of the underworld for the next 10 years. Let's see. So Eva, I mentioned Joe Wiley, that was her paramour. So the first mention Eva gets in the city papers in Tucson is in January of 1892. Wiley's driving her $400 buggy, which would have been, the Cadillac of its time, and they start to cross the railroad tracks near the depot in Tucson. And there's a train coming. And they're not going fast enough to get across the tracks, and they can't stop because the horse is at a trot. And so Wiley tries to make a U-turn. This does not work out really well. The buggies did not have seatbelts. Both of them were thrown out of the buggy, and the buggy and the horse ran away. They did survive the incident, a little bruised, but they made it inside. So, here, and where's the restricted district? Okay, so, Gay Alley, everything you see here in red is a brothel. It's a crib. Actually, there were cottage rooms. Each one of them had a door and a window, and except the number 12. And this is what Eva Blanchard owned, this whole chunk right here. And it was her brothel. So she also owned the saloon here. So, which made it really convenient to get drinks for customers. But yeah, so they estimate probably about 100 women were working there at any given time. It also kind of spread out a little bit onto Ochoa Street, down here on McCormick Street, and over here near the old Kentucky Saloon. Yeah, they weren't really keeping to the area, and these girls would get raided regularly. In here it was illegal, but the girls on the outskirts, and $10 fine. So, oh, there's Joe. Great mustache. Fabulous mustache. Yeah, so he's a professional gambler. In fact, the census said he was a roulette. Actually, they spelled it really horribly. His specialty was roulette, and he also played Pharaoh. As to, let's see here. Okay, this is another picture. Was really, really fortunate to find all these pictures of her. She had a habit of going and having her picture taken. Again, Mr. Bowman took this. Even though he didn't approve, he didn't mind taking the money. But a girl named Elizabeth Healy, they called her Lily, knew Eva. And this is what she said about her. They called her Madam then, and she was Madam Blanchard. And she was well educated. Not only that, she played it very well on the piano. She was a very kind woman, very generous woman. And she wasn't pretty, but she was good looking. And she was rather stout, because at the time they liked stout women. And she dressed well and wore large hats with big plumes, and continued to wear them even after they went out of style. When she walked in a store, you'd think she was an opera singer walking. She just kind of strolled across. So obviously she's a rather impressive person. So, let's see. So, Elizabeth went on to say there's only one house in the area of Gay Alley, and it was the one Eva had. It was entirely apart from the alley. It was a nice house and built at the end. And the name of the alley was actually Sabina. And Blanchard had her own house, and in her house, She had her own cook, she had her own set of girls, and I think she may have had as many as 6. I don't think anymore, but they were expensive. So yeah, she's running a very high-end, what they would call a parlor house. Okay, quick thing, prostitution hierarchy. At the very, very top is the courtesans. Courtesans were usually women who worked on their own. They lived in town anywhere they wanted to. They were entrepreneurs, and they serviced the men, the wealthiest men in town. Next down on the hierarchy is the parlor house. Parlor house is very, very finely furnished, finely finished. The girls are usually very talented, very pretty. This is the girls in the parlor houses are at the top of their game. And next after that, we have the brothels. There's about 3 types of brothels. There's a high-end one that wants to be like the parlor house, but it's a little cheaper. This is going to serve the middle class gentlemen. Then you have just a regular brothel, more the working class, and then you have the low-end brothels. These have no pretensions at all. They're just kind of, they're a house with a bunch of beds. Then, as you go down, you get the cottage girls. Most women who worked in the red light districts would be considered cottage girls. They were entrepreneurs, they were working for themselves. Unlike in a parlor house where the madam would make all the arrangements, financial and this kind of thing, and these girls did it themselves. They're doing all their own business, and you take care of all the business themselves. Then you get the crib girls. Crib girls are one step lower. Crib girls, now we're looking at volume trade. These girls are entrepreneurs. Sometimes they'll have a pimp or a procurer who's putting them out there, and they're servicing lots of men every night. And usually, $1, 25 cents to $1 at a time. Which was a little bit more than we think it is now, but it still wasn't much. At the very, 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 very bottom you had, I should mention Chinese girls. Chinese women were basically slaves. Chinese prostitutes and there were none in Tucson that I could find any record of, but in places like San Francisco, they were locked into the cribs, and all they did was service the men, one after the other, and they usually made nothing, or they were indebted to somebody who had brought them over, and so they worked until their youth ran out or they died. At the very, very bottom of the hierarchy is the streetwalker. This person is usually homeless, usually a drug addict, usually has venereal diseases, and she is plying her trade anywhere she can. It's pretty ugly. Usually for the price of a drink or another opium pipe or something like that. I mean, these girls are like down at the bottom. The problem with prostitution is you don't go up, you go down. It just keeps going down. As the young pretty girls in the parlor houses know eventually they're gonna end up down here. There's no upward mobility, unless you're smart like Eva Blanchard and have the talent and the business acumen to become a madam. So, should be fairly well. Let's see.
Yes, prostitution 101.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, a lot of people, we all, many of us grew up with Miss Kitty. And they never mentioned what Miss Kitty did. She was a saloon owner. Yeah. So we have a very romanticized idea of what prostitution was like in the West from movies, and it really, really was not really a great career. Unless, of course, you happen to be like Eva Blanchard. Okay, Pima County Courthouse. Well, Eva and Wiley show up here on July 17, 1983, because Wiley assaulted Eva, and he was arrested, hauled into court. They charged him with assault. He was reprimanded by the Justice of the Peace, and then fined $15. Yeah, so about $300 in today's money. So, as I said, they had a very tumultuous relationship when they were younger. Let's see. Then in October of that year, Eva shows up under her original name, Annie Sullivan, in St. Louis, Missouri. The St. Louis Globe Democrat recorded she was traveling under a given name. She got drunk on the evening of the 19th and proceeded to kick out the windows in a cab. When she refused to pay for the damages, the driver took her directly to the police station and they filed charges against her. When Eva was searched, the police found she had $1,027.17 on her person. Allegedly, she had left Tucson with almost $5,000. Additionally, getting an idea of how well she's doing. They said she had at least $4,000 worth of diamonds on, a railroad ticket, and several papers. She was richly dressed, and she traveled to Tucson, originally to Chicago, to take in the World's Columbian Expedition. Then she went to St. Louis, and she kept telling people she could write a check for $25,000 and it would pass. When she sobered up, they let her go, and nothing more came of it. So she gets back to Tucson, April 10th, 1894. Inside the brothel, she and Wiley have another fight, and this fight gets really messy. Allegedly, she kicked him out, and he came back to get his clothing and his personal items. And she was out at the time. She comes walking in the door, she sees him and goes, "You're here?" They proceed to, he goes, "Yeah, I'm here for my stuff." She says, "I'm not going to give it to you." He goes, "Well, I'll take some meters," and the fight starts. At some point, she takes a lighted oil lamp and throws it at him. Well, when he doesn't immediately catch on fire and burn to death, she goes to the other room, procures a Winchester, and comes back out and tries to shoot him. Takes 2 shots at him, one supposedly missed his head by an inch. And then she runs into the other room, and he follows her to try to get the Winchester away. She takes another shot at him, and then he punches her in the face. Okay, so tumultuous relationship? Yeah. So, of course, gunshots get fired, they get arrested, hauled into court, and at that time, when you get hauled into court, the first place you went to was the Justice Court. Well, first you went to the Justice of the Peace, you filed charges. So, and then you have an examination before the justice, and he decides whether or not it's a felony or misdemeanor. If it's misdemeanor, they take care of it right there. You get fined, you get some jail time. It's felony, they hold you for the grand jury. Well, our 2 lovebirds here, they charge each other with assault with intent to kill. Yeah, they really love each other. So they go into court, they're released on $500 bail apiece, and the guy's like, "That's a felony charge." Justice is like, "I'm holding you for the grand jury." And they're like, "Okay, well, we're not in jail," so they continue about their business. When the grand jury finally does meet in September, they decide that by this time, Wiley and Eva made up, and they decide not to press charges against him. So, it ends well as it can. So, anyway, yeah. The stories about Eva I was working on there she is again. Oh yeah, this is the newspaper article from the Boston Globe, alias Eva Blanchard. There she is in the refinery. Yeah, the stories about her, there's just so many of them. I'm currently working on a book about the red light districts of Tucson. And when I kept running across her name in here, I was like, this woman is just, I like her. She's really cool. And so I decided to take this out and turn it into a story, which has now been submitted to the Journal of Arizona History. Because I think she really, really does deserve to get some recognition. I mean, she helped build Tucson. There's people like Josephine Molly Hughes, who really gets credited as being the mother of Tucson. But she was the wife of the newspaper editor. She did fight for the suffrage, but she was also a teetotaler. She hated prostitution, she hated gambling, she hated saloons, and she really contributed nothing to the city's coffers because she wasn't employed. Eva, on the other hand, was paying licensing, she's paying fines, she's paying taxes, personal property, she's investing in real estate. She's building Tucson, literally, and with a lot of money, as you can tell. So, you know, she really kind of deserves some credit. Let's see here. Okay, so, but there's, yeah, the stories just keep getting better. She was a heck of a philanthropist. There's a lot of records of her donating to a lot of the Catholic organizations, to just all the time, especially after she drops being Eva Blanchard. One point she reads a story in the San Francisco Examiner about this woman who was destitute and begging in the streets, who lost her mobility, and so Eva read the story, sent the paper, I think it was like $100, told it to give it to a local grocer and have the groceries delivered to this woman in her house. Another time, there's a guy also in San Francisco, got run over by a streetcar, lost one leg and a foot. He said that he was in the county hospital for months. He said, if I could just get around, I could, you know, be of use. I hate being in here. And he was just asking to have some prosthetic legs. Eva was one of the biggest donators to get him the new legs. So, I mean, she just had a big heart. However, it didn't want to cross her. There's a great story. The cat, let's see, Bishop Peter Brigade. Okay, St. Augustine Cathedral is one of the highlights of downtown Tucson. It's actually the second. There was one before. It's been there since the 1700s, and it was falling apart. So the diocese decided they were going to do another St. Augustine Cathedral. And they were looking for donations and stuff, and even approached the bishop. She goes, you know, I would love to help out with this. I'd like to put I'll give you some money as long as you put a stained glass window in there for my family. And the bishop was like, Eva later said, he was polite, but he said no. Well, as they got closer to completion, they realized they didn't have enough money. And guess who they turned to? So the bishop calls Eva in because she was a devout Catholic, which seems really odd considering the position she's in, but hey, you know. And he's like, listen, we reconsidered, we'll take your money and we'll let you have the stained glass window. And Eva politely said, no. So, like I said, the stories about her, there's like so many of them, and hence the reason for an article. One of the other madams, Eggsy Sedgemore, was sent to the territorial prison. She had one of her girls was quitting. The girl hadn't paid her rent, and they got in a fight. Eggsy pulled out a revolver and took 3 shots at the girl. She was arrested for attempted murder. She was tried, and they gave her 3 years in the territorial prison. Almost immediately after trial was over, Eva started circulating a petition. Now, have to consider, women had no rights. Women could not serve on juries. Women could not vote. Women, literally none. But she got this petition circulating, and she circulated among the powerful men in Tucson. The jurors, all the jurors who had helped to convict Eggsy, trial judge, the lawyers, even the prosecuting attorney, many of the businessmen all signed it. And within 3 months, Eggsy was released from prison. She had some pull, obviously. There's no more news of Eva really, and of course, she shows up and then she like disappears from the paper. You know, she's not making the social columns because of what she does. Something, and when she does make the social columns, it's usually because of something bad. But anyway, September 1901, she filed a complaint against Wiley. And there's that bishop. Sorry. And there's Eggsy. That's her prison picture. Love that, man. What? You get to wear your own clothes in prison now. Oh, if you're a woman. They didn't have little outfits for them. So, the biggest sneeze I've ever seen. Okay. Okay, we'll get to Mr. Smalley here in a second. Let's see. So at one point, Wiley and Eva appear in court again, this time because he stole a diamond ring from her. He had given her these diamond earrings, diamond and emerald encrusted earrings, supposedly worth about $400. And she didn't really like the earrings, so she had them turned into a ring. Well, he borrowed the ring so he could go show off in Bisbee. And one of the guys, saloon owners there, saw the ring, and allegedly Wiley sold the ring to the saloon owner. And so this turns into a big, big thing. They fight back and forth over this ring. Well, allegedly, actual reason was because Eva was mad at Wiley because he would not take her to the World's Fair. And so she filed a suit against him. Eventually, Wiley ends up with the ring, and Eva ends up being charged for pressing charges against him. But, she had so much money, it really doesn't matter. Okay. On October 7th, the city council, in its regular meeting, Attorney John Wright appeared before the council on Eva's behalf and complained about the houses of prostitution which were outside of the restricted district. This is a detriment to Eva Blanchard, and unless the law is enforced, she threatens to move downtown. According to George Smalley here, who was the editor of the Tucson Citizen, when she went into the council room, she's like, okay, listen, you need to close these other girls down. She goes, I know they're operating, the police know they're operating, and this needs to stop. This is cutting into my business. A little more specific is that she told the council, she goes, if you don't, I'm gonna move in next to the Methodist church. The city council's like, yeah, right, she goes, I already own the property. So, anyway, so yeah, so Smalley, when he was there, and there's another art, when they were fighting over the ring, Smalley talked about Eva Blanchard, and he referred to her he described her as being fat, fair, and fully 40. So, according to this article he published in 1954, part of his remembrances, he said, a madam from Gay Alley, who in 1898 paid a visit to the city council. She went through the story. They all knew her, blah, blah, blah. Smalley had been present at the meeting and admitted that he had called her fair, fat, and fully 40. Yeah. So he goes, he's at the desk after the paper was published. I sat at my desk, engrossed in my writing, when I felt something hard pressed against my back. Looking up, I saw the madam glaring at me menacingly, standing close to me. She had on a long holster, and in the folds of steel rubbing against my back, and it felt like a pistol. I heard the click of the 6-shooter as she cocked it. I was helpless, and with a woman who had a bad reputation standing over me. I knew a lot of blasphemous words, but she used some I'd never heard before. She denounced me. Her tirade lasted a long time, and the more she searched her versatile vocabulary to express her anger and her opinion, the harder she pressed the steel into my back. When she finally released me, she said if I ever put her name in the paper again, she would shoot a hole in me large enough for a rat to jump through. As she was leaving, she turned and said, I may be fair, I may be fat, but I am not 40. So it seems actually there are two incidents, the ring incident and then the city council incident, and he decided to combine them. Whether this incident actually happened, who knows? But, considering what Eva was like with Wiley, with Bishop, I wouldn't put it past her. Anyway, and down there, the picture down there is Smalley. Smalley knew a lot of people. The guy standing with him, holding the revolver on him, is Billy Stiles, who was a notorious train robber, part-time sheriff, part-time train robber, one of those guys. Yeah, and also probably one good story about him sometime. He had to be the most wily outlaw in all of Arizona history. He never did a day in jail, and he eventually dies in Nevada as a deputy sheriff. He gets killed, and they didn't know who he was. They had no idea. Yeah, it's a great story. Anyway, just sorry, segue. Okay, so, let's see, how am I doing on time?
Fine.
Oh, very good. Okay. Okay, so Manny Drachman actually grew up in Tucson. He was born about a mile and a half from Gay Alley. And said he used to pass it regularly on his way to school in his youth. He knew what the number 12 was. He said there was only basically he alleged there were about 220 legal prostitutes working in those houses, and of course it was dominated by Eva's number 12 on the corner. Let's see. Yeah, he said eventually they finally built a wall because they were worried about us kids going by. He goes, I don't know if it ever did any good, but they built a wall around it anyway. So, Eva and Wiley were back in civil court in July of 1902. This time, Eva was suing Wiley for $425. She loaned Wiley $950 so he could open 2 gambling games in the Congress Hall Saloon. He bought himself a faro layout and he bought himself a roulette wheel. The loan was made without security, not even interest was demanded. In other words, it was just a friendly little touch. Well, he said he only owed her $19, and that was all he was going to pay her. So she filed a suit against him. I mean, just gotta love this couple. The sheriff confiscates the games. I just imagine the sheriff and his deputies walking down the road with the roulette wheel under their arm. Eventually, Eva is found that he didn't pay her, and Eva wins the suit. And now Wiley goes for money. At one point, she said in an interview with the paper, she goes, I've taken everything he's owned, and I will continue to take everything he owns. Okay, so March 6, 1903, an article appears in the paper. Yeah, this is probably the inside. This is inside of the parlor house, and you see beautiful lamp, velvet, wood. I mean, high end. This is a place like what Eva would have had, and what the girls would have been operating in. Okay. So, 1903. Notice is hereby given that I have sold out my business known as the number 12 and the 73, the favorite saloon. All bills due at the above date will be paid by the undersigned, and all claims due on this date will be collected by the undersigned. Signed, Eva Blanchard. She's out of business, officially. This place. Been 10 years, having a good run. I love her little dog. But she had it. So, she obviously knew exactly when to pull out. The city council passed ordinance 169 on July 6, 1903, just 4 months later. The ordinance effectively banned all houses of ill fame and prostitution within the city limits. However, this being said, the ordinance was rarely enforced. They used it to fine the prostitutes and make more money for the city. In fact, there were accusations given by both papers that that's the only reason they passed this law was another way for them to pull money out of these girls. So, he obviously even knew exactly when to pull out. She knew it was going to get harder and it was going to cost more to keep doing what she was doing. And really, she had property all over Tucson, a lot of property at this point. So she sells out. Gay Alley would continue to operate until 1916. Actually, technically till 1917. They officially close it in 1916, but the girls won't leave. They hang out for about another year until they finally in 1917, they bring in like the feds, marshals, sheriffs, and they raid Gay Alley. But there's nobody there, like it's empty. It continues to stand until the 1970s when they do a civic improvement, and then they demolished it. Currently, it is under the east parking lot of the Tucson Convention Center. Okay, so what's Eva doing? Well, this is going to sound really weird, but this story gets weirder. So, on September 8th, 1904, just about a year later, Joseph Wiley married Annie E. O'Sullivan in Chicago. Yeah, this like just say what? They eventually returned. They then returned to Tucson. She is now Annie Sullivan. Eva Blanchard has ceased to exist. Of course, people know her, they know who she was, but nobody mentions it. Like, it's just, and my guess is just because she had so much money. 1910, let's see, shows that the couple was living on 62 Franklin Street. Neither was employed, but they owned all their own home, and the money came in from Annie's real estate investments. This is her a little older. Let's see. Miss Healy said, Eva Blanchard was a devout Catholic. In fact, I learned many things from her directly because when they closed, she sold out her business to a woman named Edith Hall. Actually, that was a mistake. That's beside the point. So then Eva married Joe Wiley. Well, she married him, and they lived down on Jackson Street. Of course, to begin with, Madame Blanchard was a very good businesswoman. There were 3 houses on North Stone Avenue, 1 on Franklin Street, nice houses, which she rented, and she and Joe lived down there. The 3 houses, she had 3 houses on Stone Avenue. Later on, when the Tucson Daily Star decided to move, they bought the houses from her. So, like, yeah, she did really well on her real estate investment. Let's see. Wiley, on the other hand, was kind of a loose end. He returns to Tucson. He doesn't really have as much investment because he has been taking all his money. So he decides to do what he does best. He's a gambler. So he opens a roadhouse and tries his hand at gambling. Unfortunately, the city council in May of 1905 passed a law against gambling. And he was, a couple of sheriff's deputies show up. They place a $1 bet on roulette, another $1 on faro, and they lose. Ha ha. But that doesn't stop them. They turn around and file charges against him. He ends up being convicted of running an illegal gambling operation and is fined $100 and given 15 months in jail. So at least Eva was rid of him for a while. Okay. Later, Wiley would serve as the sergeant of the arms for the state legislature and as a Pima County deputy sheriff. He did lose a latter appointment when during a traffic stop. He was with two other officers. They thought it was dark. They were going by where Evergreen Cemetery is now. By this time, we're in automobiles. The buggies are long gone. And this car that they're passing, these deputy sheriffs are passing, starts making weird movements. So they pull up next to it, and they start firing into it. They thought it was bootleggers. It turned out it wasn't. It was a couple coming home from the theater. She takes a bullet through the body. It kills her. Wiley and all 3 of them get charged with first-degree murder. They end up getting convicted of second-degree murder. Wiley and they pull sentences between 10 and 15 years each in determinate sentences. However, Wiley is out in less than 3 months, as is one of the other guys, because they determined via the ballistics it was not his bullet that killed the woman. The one guy who does stay in there stays in there for about 2 years, and then he gets out but dies immediately of a heart attack. But this is pretty much just kind of really, people remember this about Wiley, and he kind of falls out of favor after this. He's rarely mentioned in the newspapers, almost up to his death. He just becomes persona non grata. Meanwhile, one of the funny things is Annie doesn't change. In April of 1913, she appears before the city council. This, obviously is not her first time doing this. With the delegation of property owners who resided on North Stone Avenue, petitioning the city council not to pave the street. It had already been paved. They didn't want to pay any more money to have it repaved. Obviously, in the 10 years since she quit the sporting life, Tucsonans forgot how tenacious and forthright Annie could be. Mrs. Wiley, said the Daily Star, addressed the council with as much self-possession as a corporate attorney, and even engaged in an argument with the most adept argufier of the council, W.H. Thompson, holding her own in a 15-minute argumentative dialogue. So, yeah, that's like, Anyway, so, and her life just keeps going on like this. There's lots of records of her real estate investments and stuff like this. Not worth getting into. It's really kind of prosaic, but yeah, she just keeps making money, and she's doing. Let's see. Joseph Wiley dies in Tucson on March 26, 1947. He was 82 years old. No, Annie didn't kill him. He was interred in an unmarked grave in the Evergreen Cemetery. I've been to see it. It's just patch grass. It turned out that he was not Catholic, and he did not want a funeral service. He didn't want anything, and Eva gave him exactly what she wanted. However, Eva did come back later and say, I had a lot of masses said for him. Annie Sullivan Wiley, aka Eva Blanchard, dies on June 26, 1947 at the age of 82, or sorry, December 23rd, 1957, she outlives him by 10 years at the age of 92. Her requiem mass and funeral service were performed on Friday, December 27th in the San Augustine Cathedral, yep, that same cathedral. A rosary was said for Annie the night before at the Parker Care Chapel. She was interred in Holy Hope Cemetery under a simple metal concrete headstone, which reads Tucson Pioneer, and that's it there. I think it's really funny. I love the irony of that. In its obituary, the Daily Star stated Annie was born in County Clare, Ireland. Quote, Miss Wiley was described by friends as a former beauty who possessed remarkable command of the English language. Wait, she's Irish. Okay. Anyway, and was once an accomplished musician. Her beauty probably attracted many eyes when she first stepped off the train at the old Southern Pacific Station, November 20th, 1887, carrying a white poodle dog, and rode from the station to the Cosmopolitan Hotel in a hat with the poodle in arms and a lacy white satin umbrella held high. Neither the Tucson Citizen or the Daily Star in their obituaries made any mention of Eva Blanchard. Anyway. I know everybody who's really used to seeing me do these things, like most of the time, these stories don't have a happy ending. It's like getting hanged or shot. And, you know, it's like it's kind of nice, right, where some, like, nobody gets killed. You know, well, we make assumptions about how wild the West really was anyway. So, anyway, anybody have any questions?
Any children?
No, none.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually surprising that, assuming that that 8 years was spent working as a prostitute, they shouldn't contract any venereal diseases either. That was rampant, especially at that time, especially early 1800s, the 1940s, I believe. Syphilis was rampant, and it would kill you. There was no cure for it until penicillin came along. There were treatments for it, but it was a horrid way to die. I won't go into detail. Yeah, mercury compounds, I mean, sulfur, they pour everything up inside you to try to, but all it does was alleviate the symptoms until the very end, and then you just sort of literally rot away. Any other questions? Okay.
I have a feeling that this story is more common than people think, with all of the great movers and shakers of the West, you know.
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah.
In doing the book I'm working on, we find these really the madams were really powerful because they did have so much money, and a lot of them became really common household names. There was Jenny Botters, who was a madam up in Jerome. She was worth $500,000 when she died, and it all went to her son, who immediately left his wife and child and disappeared. Yeah, so, but yeah, and then there's Abby Silks up in Denver. I mean, yeah, a lot of these women became household names for Western aficionados. People read about the West, and it was true all over. I mean, it wasn't just in the West; it was also back east, New York, San Francisco, and these restricted districts were fairly common. New York had the Tenderloin, San Francisco had the Tenderloin. El Paso had Hell's Half Acre, I love that name. Let's see, there was the Storyville in New Orleans, and these were official districts that were set aside for prostitution. And almost every town had one of any size. So, and a lot of these, like I said, a lot of these women put so much into the city coffers that it became respectable as they could be. Unfortunately, a lot of them also ended up dying really poorly, like Jenny Bonner, who gets shot to death by her lover. But thankfully Eva didn't. We got a great story out of it. Hopefully, as I said, my intention is to get her the recognition she really deserves as being a Tucson pioneer. That's all I got.
And do you have some books to sell?
Yeah, I got some back there.
I would look forward to another book too.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna mention, my last book was, which kind of got me interested in this, was about Edna Loftus. She was an English actress, hugely famous during her time for about 3 or 4 years in England and France. She then makes a couple bad marriages, and by the end of her life, she's working as a prostitute in San Francisco, and I think tuberculosis. And it's just this story arc goes like this. It's really, but it got me interested, and that's what kind of drove me to do the prostitution thing there. I always wanted to write about Tucson because I'm from there originally, and so I wanted to write something about it, but I wanted to write something nobody else ever touched. And nobody ever written a book about this, so I thought it'd be interesting. And luckily I ran across Eva Blanchard on the way, so.
Great story.
Thank you very much.